Right, good morning, everybody. I'm going to kick off now. So welcome everyone who's joined us today. We've got a really jam-packed webinar where we're going to be talking about how we're preparing for an increase in the production of hydrogen in the UK. Quite an important topic as we have new Prime Minister, new administration, new goals. But a really important imperative to get to net zero and to make sure hydrogen has a key role in that across a number of different sectors. So I've got some really great speakers here today. Just to introduce myself, I'm Angie Needle. I'm the Strategy Director at Cadent. And for those who don't know Cadent, we deliver natural gas to 11 million homes and businesses up and down the country. About half of the country's gas use goes through our pipes today. And we are very much looking at how we transition the gas network to transport hydrogen safely and effectively to wherever it needs to go for whatever use. So we've got lots and lots of projects going on there. We may talk about some of those later. I'm also the Vice President of Hydrogen UK. And so it's really important that we come together as a community, which we have here, to talk about how production can scale to meet the future needs. So just a bit of logistics. We've got four amazing panelists, which we'll introduce to you in a moment. They're going to speak for about 10 minutes or so each. Some have slides to do that. And there is a Q&A which we'll use for capturing questions and having a good old discussion after the panelists have completed. And if you can just make sure you put your questions into the Q&A rather than the chat, because otherwise I'll get confused and I'm not very good at manning lots and lots of things. So you just be doing me a favour. So that would be really great. So we're going to kick off. I'm going to ask each speaker to just introduce themselves and get stuck into the topic. So just to tell you who we've got, first of all, we've got Barney Wharton, who's the Director of Future Electricity Systems at Renewable UK. We've got Dr. Nguyen Xing, who's the Head of Hydrogen at OWC and ABL Group. We've got Becky Mclean, the Sustainability Director at Sweco. And we've got Ross Fairley, who's a partner at Burgess and Salmon. So we've got lots to get through. So first of all, Barney, I'm going to come to you. You can kick off the panel. Thanks.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for having me on today. So, so hi, firstly, introduce myself. So I'm Barney Wharton. I am, as Angie said, Director of Future Electricity Systems at Renewable UK. For those that don't know Renewable UK, a trade association, sort of representing companies really at the heart of the energy transition. Traditionally, we were born of the British Wind Energy Association and representing primarily wind generators and the supply chain there, and some of our members are on this panel as well. But increasingly, as we move towards a renewables dominated electricity system, we're thinking about what that looks like. So we've done great work in sort of bringing wind and commercializing wind, but that has huge implications on the future of the electricity and energy system. And hydrogen is a big part of that. Hydrogen can offer a huge opportunity to take sort of excess wind generation. When there is more wind than generating electricity than the system needs, you can be pumping that into green hydrogen production. And similarly, there's going to be times when we're not producing the volumes of wind that we need, and we need to get our power from elsewhere. And again, that stored hydrogen could be used to produce electricity. So we see this hugely important interaction between decarbonising electricity system and the role that hydrogen has to play. And I think the sort of first thing I want to reflect on is just how far we have come. We weren't really talking about hydrogen production very much. Really 3-4 years ago, it was chatted about. It was sort of big, I guess. Maybe 10 years ago, things quietened down. But hydrogen has become a hugely important part of the future energy system. And we've really seen that in the production of the hydrogen strategy, and then all the work that has gone on since then. We now have the hydrogen business models in the electricity security bill. And with politics where they are, I think hydrogen is going to remain really, really important. We're obviously in a very different place to where we were even 6 months ago. And off the back of the Ukraine crisis and the new Prime Minister, I think it's important to reflect on a few bits and pieces. So, energy security is now key. And again, I see hydrogen as being hugely important in that energy security piece. The Prime Minister announced in Parliament that she wants the UK to be a net energy exporter by 2040. Now, oil and gas will be part of that, but electricity and electricity exports will be part of that. But I think, again, the role of hydrogen as an opportunity for the UK to be an energy exporter. I think Europe is going to see itself as a hydrogen importer, energy importer. So let's use that opportunity and all the resources that the UK has to deliver or to deliver on that promise. So there's this huge important role, but we've got a lot to do to kind of get the UK to the position where we need to be in order to sort of take advantage of all those opportunities. As I say, we have the business models in the bill. We need to continue that. There's been this conversation around kind of what happens to the energy security bill, given the sort of the new government and this new political landscape. But there's some really important stuff in there that we need to maintain. And the hydrogen business model section and the stuff that will bring forward these projects is going to be absolutely critical to that. And one of the reasons that's critical is because there is this huge industrial opportunity for the UK as well. We've got manufacturers like ITM Power, Siemens are looking at this, Johnson Matthey, again, are kind of thinking about what they could be doing in the UK. And we need to ensure that we have this structure and this business model brought forward so people can start investing, not just in their projects, but the supply chain as well. So we need that long-term view, and we've got that out to 2030 in the 5 gigawatt target, but really keeping that in place is going to be absolutely essential. I think the other thing just to reflect on in this context as well is, this is a new industry. We haven't been producing lots of hydrogen, the sorts of volumes we were talking about before. So we need to make sure kind of the wide range of regulations are in place for hydrogen, and we have a hydrogen working group that both Ross and you are on at Renewable UK, but really thinking about kind of what does the planning, permitting and licensing look like for hydrogen? Do we need to introduce new regulations, or do the existing regulations we have in place fit that the hydrogen development, particularly green hydrogen, is where we're coming from. And then, finally, I just want to sort of mention that there's a global opportunity here. Everybody is thinking about this, but it's a global challenge. It's not just the UK, Australia, Japan, other parts of Europe. Everyone is thinking about kind of how do they build their own hydrogen production facilities. And I think if we don't grasp this right now, we may miss out on that opportunity. So again, just coming back to this point around it, we need to really build on things now. If we get it right today, we can create the UK as a green hydrogen production hub for Europe and potentially the world. But if we delay, if we kind of essentially screw up, we may not see those economic and environmental benefits that we have. So I'll sort of leave it there as an introduction, but I look forward to a conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Barney. Thank you for that. Good introduction about the global race around making hydrogen. That's great. Thank you. Right. So next up is Dr. Nguyen Xing. So I'll pass over to you to share your thoughts on this topic.
Thank you very much, Angela, for sharing. Hello, everyone. My name is Nguyen Dinh. I'm the Global Head of Hydrogen for OLUC, a company of the ABL Group. We are headquartered in London, and our team is present in hydrogen globally. Just let me introduce a little bit about ourselves. Yeah, so we gain experience from more than 30 hydrogen projects over the value chain in production, storage, transportation, and application globally. So delighted to be here, and also special thanks to Mr. Barnaby Wharton, who actually chairing the Renewable UK Hydrogen Working Group, so speaking today and mentioned very important and highly what needed for the preparation of increased hydrogen production in the UK. Yeah. So let me make a little bit, maybe a few detailed points. First of all, look at UK resource, green resource, what we need, what we have to produce green hydrogen. That is, we have the huge offshore wind resource. We have good resource in onshore wind, and future maybe wave hydro, and we have some solar resource. So in terms of resource, we are good. Yeah. However, look at what we need for hydrogen production. That is the other piece, is the water. So onshore water or fresh water is we have some limited. So we need to look at sea water. So if we can coping with the sea water rising, so we can think about using the sea water for electrolysis. That's why marine electrolyzer is one of the key important that we can increase the hydrogen production here. So one recommendation is the UK may focus on increasing the fund for R&D, for support for company, for testing and commercialize the marine electrolyzer. I visited ITM Power in May in Southfield, so great development there. But what we discussed is that they may be getting busy with the order from many hydrogen development. So that's something you can think that, as what Mr. Watson mentioned about supply chain, maybe some bottlenecking, we can start from now investing in electrolyzer. We're not investing in only UK, but that is the core technology, and we can invest and we can do that in other countries as well. So marine electrolyzer is not key. If going further, we have the huge resource in floating wind. So floating wind technology now being developed, being testing, going to be commercialized. So coupling between marine electrolyzer and floating wind is one of the second recommendation. Yeah. Thirdly, hydrogen being developed, so we need more R&D fund on testing, pilot, and physical demonstration of hydrogen production, and then application as well. And of course, we need more fund on government bodies, related government body, including company like Cadence. You deliver gas to the household as well, to the network. And actually, I leave my important key point to the later part, that we need to focus more on demand side, increase the demand in green hydrogen, also diversify the demand. Because we need the market to be demand driven. We have more demand domestic, and then we should have more driver for increasing hydrogen production. So how to increase and diversify the demand in green hydrogen? That's why we look at diversified application in several industries, like transport. So far, as I put progress regarding the application for train, mobile personal car, but maybe we look at the other application like a maritime and train and virtual. That actually they consume a lot of energy. So something like a maritime application would be another focus on diversify the demand. Yeah. We're not only doing analysis, but we need to look at design and demonstration of the maritime application. So far, like in our ABL group, we have designed number of fuel cell or hydrogen power virtual. That's something maybe you can look at the website as well. Yeah. And also important is that hydrogen is new, so there's a lot of risks regarding technology, regarding the supply chain, so on. So we need to put more support and incentive for the pioneering project, industry project in hydrogen production and application. Because those projects, they taking the very high risk. That's why we need more support. That project, pioneering project, very important. They kicking off the industry as well. Yeah. And lastly, we need kind of system or lesson learned that we not repeat the mistake, the lesson in other countries, so the pivot project in UK as well. So that should be kind of a bit more systematically, that we not repeated anything. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm happy for further question and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you there. So I mean, that made me think about a lot of questions, right, around the development and innovation we need around floating wind and seawater driven electrolysis. So I'm sure we'll have some questions coming in around that. Thank you so much. Great. So next up we have Becky Mclean, who's the Sustainability Director at SWECO. Welcome, Becky. Over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Becky Mclean. I'm a Sustainability Director for SWECO UK. I've got a background in environmental consultancy and sustainability work, and currently my role includes working with colleagues across SWECO Group in the UK and Europe to deliver our hydrogen strategy and also the projects that we've been working on within those countries. I've got some slides for you today, so I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully this all works. I press that button. Has that all worked? Can everyone see that okay? Perfect. I will keep this nice and short and sweet, hopefully, so it's not death by PowerPoint. I put this up because actually I think the kind of interesting question is about hydrogen production, and there are so many questions about hydrogen production that I went to speak to a number of colleagues yesterday in SWECO UK and in our European countries, and you'll be pleased to know that everybody had a slightly different view or perspective on what it was that we would need to do. So I think that in itself promotes why we need these types of webinars, so that we can have these open discussions and get to the bottom of some of these tricky questions. I think something that everybody agreed on, if I can remove this bar, that might end up full screen.
You can see it full screen, Becky.
Can you see it full screen?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Something they all agreed on, and hopefully you guys will as well, is that we don't just need technology to get us to net zero, we need to change our behaviours. So part of this journey is about actually minimising our need for energy, not just coming up with technology so that we can produce more energy. And then the energy needs that we do have, let's replace those with sustainable alternatives. And I think that will be a number of different technology solutions, and there isn't going to be just one golden bullet for any of this, and hydrogen will be a part of that. And then reducing that negative impact of any of the fossil fuels. There's a lot of discussion papers, there's a lot of information out there about the kind of role that perhaps blue hydrogen will have as part of our energy transition. And that again is part of this overall patchwork of energy requirements and needs and technologies that we will have in the UK. There we go. I thought it was useful just to put up on the screen what we mean by hydrogen and all the different types of chain, if you like, of the hydrogen and things that can be used for. And my main point here is just because we can use hydrogen for all these things, it might not be the best solution. And sometimes we get very excited by technology and we rush off and do things. But there's a point about making sure that it's the best technology for what it is we need to do. And for some of these, it's very efficient. And my next slide talks about the different kind of efficiencies in these different chains. So for some of these, hydrogen makes perfect sense. And they're maybe like at the top of the list, the easy to do, the things we can tick off. And perhaps part of this strategy for the UK, part about us being global leaders in hydrogen, is about doing the easy stuff first and really getting that mobilised and not being distracted about the things that are possibly a bit more difficult, that may take a lot longer, but could distract us from actually making quite big progress in our hydrogen journey. In the news, there is constant articles about the amount of investment that's happening for hydrogen, whether it's our own government, whether it's some other huge players in the energy industry. This is from India, and I believe that Adani and their companies are like, these are some of the richest people in the world. I think just below Elon Musk, one of my colleagues was telling me yesterday, there's a huge amount of money that is there to be invested in hydrogen, but I think we have to make sure it's invested in the right way. I worked on carbon capture and storage, and was one of the first kind of EIAs that we did was for Hunterston, and that started in 2007. And we've submitted the very first EIA to the Scottish Government for a carbon capture storage for a clean coal-fired power station. We had experts from Denmark in coal-fired power stations. We had carbon capture storage experts on our team. We had EIA experts, you name it. We had the cast of thousands. We had money, we had funding, but it still didn't get built, because sometimes these things are not the most simple of solutions, or we live in a democracy and people are allowed to say no, they don't want these types of developments. So I think there's lessons to be learned if we look back to where we have come to, that there is a massive role for hydrogen to play, but let's not get caught up in trying to make it too difficult and getting stuck in different types of legislation, etc., because we don't have a lot of time and we have to decarbonise now. So let's tick off the big ticket items and use the technology where it makes sense, but not get too carried away and try and use it as a golden bullet to fix everything. So this is possibly too simple, but I think the key thing from me, and one thing that Sweco prides itself on, is keeping things simple. So let's keep it simple. Let's insulate everything, first of all. Let's reduce our need for energy. Let's insulate our homes properly. Let's have a countrywide insulation program for offices, for homes. There will be challenges. Some of our buildings will be very easy to retrofit. Some of them will be very difficult, but let's do our best. Imagine how much energy we could save. We need to fund training to create this green energy army. It's something I'm very passionate about. There is a lot of discussion about green jobs. There's going to be millions of green jobs, but just now they're kind of up a bit of a mythical mountain. And I think if we're talking about a just transition, these jobs need to be accessible to all, and they don't all need a university degree. So let's come up with an education system that means that all of our people, whether that's young people, whether that's people that are retraining or changing careers, can get access to the training that they need whilst providing for their families to really make a difference, to be part of this energy green army transition that we're needing. Personal opinion here, we've got certain industries and certain things that we know are very, very difficult for us to come up with a battery that would be big enough for them to run on it. So our heavy industries, our heavy road transport, our planning policy and our approach to planning has meant that a lot of these big industrial zones are distanced from where our residential people live. There is still safety issues around hydrogen, and perhaps whilst we are dealing with those, some of the easier things to target would be locating hydrogen close to those heavy industries, creating our ports and our harbours and allowing them to become completely energy sufficient, using hydrogen and doing the easy stuff first. Energy storage is a big chat with hydrogen, and it could be a great solution, still to be completely proven. I know that the UK are now looking at opening up all their gas stores that they'd previously shut. There's lots of opportunities there, but it might not be the only solution. I saw an amazing blog post about using sand for energy storage, or there's some old technologies we've got about reverse reservoirs where we use hydro when we can possibly use that and combine it with others. We need to create demand for hydrogen if this is really going to work, so we're going to have to phase out natural gas. The circular economy, the first range of solar panels are now all going to landfill. Let's not make the same mistake again. We're looking at buildings just now and creating like a list of materials that come along with your building, so that anything that can be constructed can be deconstructed and reused. Let's learn these lessons from the past. Let's design for the future, and let's make sure any technology we're designing can be reused for future technologies. Who knows what we'll come up with next? Can we look at the hydrogen revolution as a way to address other environmental issues? For safety problems and concerns, we may want to create these places so that people won't have access to them. In fact, I can imagine that will be the case. Can we create environmental sanctuaries around these areas, biodiversity-rich areas, deal with hydrogen, but also deal with other environmental issues at the same time? Hydrogen uses water. We have huge flooding issues. Is there ways and means, and I don't have the solutions, but is there ways and means of not just solving the energy, but the environment is so interconnected with everything that we do, that let's not just siloize this, let's look at it in the whole and try and solve some of our other problems at the same time. Consenting gets a bad rap, EIA gets a bad rap. I will say I am an EIA consultant, so I may be slightly biased, but there's only a tiny percentage of huge developments that have EIAs in the UK. When you look at it in terms of all the developments, we've managed to develop coal-fired power stations, pipelines, huge energy distribution networks. EIA is not the problem. You need to find the right place. You need to make sure that the community is on board with what's being proposed. We need to provide social value with these projects, environmental enhancements. They need to be designed with the communities in mind. And there's no reason our regulations should stop that. But we do need to catch up. When I was doing the clean coal-fired power station, we were helping the government write the guidelines as we were writing our EIA. So we do need to speed things up a bit. And then I think we've got a huge opportunity to manufacture stuff in the UK. Let's not miss the boat like we did with wind farms, where we have to wait on and we're dependent on supplies from other countries across Europe and wider. You know, the UK could be an amazing centre for hydrogen. I think we've got huge opportunities. Thanks for listening. Brilliant.
Thank you, Becky. Appreciate that. Oh, what a list there you've put up there. That's a real mixture of stuff. We'll come on to that because I've got some questions, right? And I'm sure everybody else has. So just a quick reminder, if you've got some questions that you want me to put to the panel, if you can pop them in the Q&A, then we can have an interesting debate, because even there was some contrasting views, especially on storage, which we put forward earlier. So we'll have a good chat about that. Right, last speaker is Ross Fairley. He's partner at Burgess Salmon. Welcome, Ross, and I'll hand things over to you.
Thanks, Angela. Have those slides come up on the screen? Okay.
Yes, they have.
Yep, looks like they have. Okay, that's great. Yeah, so my name is Ross Fairley. As Angela said, I'm a partner. I've been specialising in energy projects now for 30 years. I should say energy and environmental projects. So been involved in those for a long time. I'm deputy chair of the United Kingdom Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association, as Barney said as well. I also sit on Renewable UK's Green Hydrogen Group. Very interested in hydrogen and actually doing some projects as well. I'm going to see if I can move the screen forward. Hold on. Okay, that's not letting me move it forward. Let's try that. No, still not working. Hold on. Sorry about this. Hold on. There we go. Sorry about that. So this is just a brief bit about Burgess Salmon. It's a law firm based in the UK. We specialise in a number of areas. One of those key sectors is energy. So hydrogen is a natural play for us, and we've established a big net zero services team, which I share for our clients who are looking at moving towards net zero. Actually, we've been involved in hydrogen for many, many years. I hesitate to say this when I say we've been involved when it was unfashionable, but now that it's fashionable, it's great, and we are heavily involved. We've been working with the likes of ITM Power. Had the privilege to work with them for many, many years, and we're involved in a variety of different hydrogen projects across the green, blue, vehicle refueling and various other areas like that. I mention net zero because I think it's quite important, and I emphasize this whenever I'm speaking about hydrogen. When we talk about hitting net zero targets and decarbonisation targets, particularly in the UK, it has to now involve a change of mindset. So traditionally, okay, as an energy lawyer, we've looked at and I've looked at energy projects that are going to decarbonise the electricity system for many, many years. But I think it's fair to say that many of the sectors up there, particularly energy, has looked at itself and devised projects to decarbonise. And what has been apparent over the years is, sometimes when you're involved in an industry, you focus on that industry and you don't raise your head above the parapet and look at, well, what's going on elsewhere in other sectors. And the key thing about net zero is, if we're going to achieve net zero, we're going to need to break the barriers down between the various key sectors that are all going to need to work together and work out what the best solutions are between those sectors in order to achieve the targets. So it's no longer good enough, I think, for anyone to be looking at, when we talk about development and production in the UK of hydrogen, well, you need to look beyond the pure production and the energy side, if you like, and you need to look at the interactions it's going to have with transport and what transport needs and desires, what it's going to mean for the built environment in terms of maybe heating and transport as well. Looking at land use and agriculture, no one's mentioned ammonia and fertilizers and so forth there. So it's got a big role to play in there. And I think, if there was ever a test case for whether our net zero ambitions in the UK are going to work or not, hydrogen is perhaps a great starter for 10, because hydrogen does have its tentacles in all of these sectors, and everyone's going to need to work together to see them through. So really, this is the slide I wanted to concentrate on just briefly by way of introduction. What I've got there is what I see as the building blocks for success of hydrogen production in the UK. And on the left-hand side, it's really things that the industry can control. But very importantly, all of that on the left has to be underpinned by the things on the right. And we do have some of those things on the right now. We do have political and policy support around hydrogen in the UK, and we do now have some form of business model. It took a little while to come to the fore, but it's there now, and hopefully it's going to come to fruition. And that's certainly bolstered the industry and bolstered interest in hydrogen. Perhaps what's missing on the right-hand side is, I think, as Barney may have mentioned, the regulation, the understanding amongst the regulators and stakeholders. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. The reality is that many of these stakeholders, many regulators who are in charge of regulating and permitting new developments, simply cannot have a handle all the time on every technology that's coming forward. And we need to play our part as an industry, as those advisors to industry, to help those regulators, to help those stakeholders, be they the public, be they local planners, be they the health and safety executive and so forth, in educating them what hydrogen means, why it's important, what issues it does, and more importantly, does not present, what are legitimate and what are not. And it feels, at least in the UK, that is the one of those building blocks on the right-hand side that needs further development, because we are likely to see in the coming years quite a number of projects coming forward. And I fear that unless we have done this job of educating various stakeholders and regulators, we could face delays and barriers to deployment. And I think that's a really important thing. The public have to be persuaded about the need for hydrogen and what it's going to mean for them. Just going back to the left-hand side, I think many of these things are in place, and you could talk to many of the technologies, the manufacturers, ITM and so forth. And I'm sure they would say that the technology is ready, that the supply chains, yes, it's early days in the supply chains. Yes, there will be stresses on the supply chains, but the supply chain can be there and can develop. I think, and Angela may have something to say about this, Angela, but I think maybe what hasn't been thought about enough and maybe has not been developed enough is the distribution system that may be needed for hydrogen, at least to accelerate it in the early days. I know that there's Andrew and the team have been involved in various studies proving various things, but I still think there's a way to go there. And I think just picking up on one point which Becky made about doing the easy stuff first, I couldn't agree more. Let's get some deployment out there. There is a slight concern I have when we say do the easy stuff first, that then everyone forgets about progressing the hard stuff. And shout me down, Barney, if you disagree with this, but I think maybe the renewable electricity system is a classic example, because we have deployed, and there's been massive deployment, but what we're now finding is what's holding things up: grid constraints, grid infrastructure, and those difficult things which maybe should have been progressed earlier on, albeit that they're long lead items. The other thing I just wanted to say was the demand. I think Nugent said this. the demand side needs to be progressed. What we have is an incentive system for production of hydrogen. And we need to concentrate on who wants this demand and who's going to be around to take this demand. If we can sort that, then it's a very compelling case for the production and success of hydrogen. And I'll leave it there.
Wonderful, thank you. I was just scribbling something down as you ended there, hence the pause. But thanks ever so much, Ross. And yeah, I will talk about the distribution of hydrogen in a moment, I guess. So I just wanted to thank all our panelists for sharing their thoughts really candidly with us all. And the best way I know to thank a panelist is to ask them a really difficult question in the Q&A. So I have some questions. So if we can all, I think we can have us all back on the screen. And there's a few questions come in as well. So I'll talk about distribution in a moment, of course, but let's just talk about some of the things that I'm going to go sort of top to bottom in the questions as I felt they came out, and I'll keep an eye on the questions at the same time. We've got quite a bit of time. So one of the things that came out from Barney, from your discussion, setting the scene, was about the value of stored hydrogen from a balancing of power systems point of view. And interestingly, somebody's put in there in the Q&A the challenge on, well, why should we use hydrogen for storage? There's lots of other means to store energy, of which, I'm assuming we're not saying hydrogen is the only way of storing energy. What's your view? And also, Becky mentioned about whether that is a priority for hydrogen or not. So I just wanted to get views on the panel as to where are we really with hydrogen storage, because it feels to me that it's a little bit behind where it ought to be, especially if we need it at scale. Barney, I'll let you kick off and then I'll get other thoughts from the group.
Cool, thank you. It's a really important question. So think about the energy system as a whole. We need to do all sorts of things in all sorts of different ways to manage the energy system. So we need batteries for short-term storage. We need compressed air. Becky mentioned pumped hydro as well as a really big part of storage. What hydrogen can do that others can't is just the volume. So if you think about a big utility scale battery is, say, a 200 megawatt capacity that may run 4 hours. So you're getting on for sort of what, 800 megawatt hours. You could use a salt cavern to store hydrogen for tens and tens of terawatt hours. So it has that volume that we'll need sort of across very long periods of low wind generation. And also you can store it for a very long time. So we could produce lots of hydrogen from solar in the summer, say, from electrolysis, and then use that in winter or next year or whatever. So that's a really critical part that hydrogen has to play, I think. And Casper asked about kind of the efficiency. Yes, there is an efficiency in there that you lose, but as Neil says in his answer, you lose efficiencies in whatever you do, and I don't think that's a concern. It's the value above and beyond that efficiency loss that's important. Are we where we need to be? No. I mean, look, this is still a really nascent industry. Let's be clear. We are talking about hydrogen production, but we're still not actually today producing very much at all. So all this stuff, and as Ross says, we need to kind of plan the whole picture. This is I like free markets, but there's a really important role for central planning, thinking about where we're trying to get to for 2050 and net zero. So yeah, nowhere near where we need to be, but we need to be working out that roadmap there today.
Thank you, Barney. Becky, have you got anything to add?
No, I just think it's a really difficult time we're in just now, because we need to do these things quickly, and doing things quickly sometimes means that things aren't perfect, but we can't wait too long either. So, but these things aren't, there's safety concerns, there's people, there's all these things, the environment issues and things like that. And I think trying to find a sweet spot with hydrogen and delivering some of these storage projects and just starting really small if we need to, just to try and get some things proven and off the ground would be brilliant. And I know when you look at the map of the hydrogen projects in the UK, there's some really exciting things going on, but there's not a lot that you've seen that has been scaled up. So I think we've got a really good track record in the UK of small and pilot, but not then making that next step, and maybe that's the bit that we need to focus on to try and move things forward a bit quicker.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of piloting. Nguyen, you wanted to add something?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to say something. Hydrogen storage is important question. It is, and I would agree fully with Mr. Wharton. We need. However, don't be worried. Don't be threatened. We can go from step by step looking at the small scale hydrogen storage for now in about like few months, year, and then small scale storage. In parallel, we can start preparing, planning, and develop technology for large scale hydrogen storage. Yeah, within ABL group, yeah, we did some study consider storing hydrogen subsea at zone carbon depleted gas field. So that's a good infrastructure we already available around UK water. So something we can consider. Why we need that larger scale? I would say in future we need something like integrated energy system where we can store hydrogen or ammonia in larger scale long term, and we can use that for power system or for the gas system. We have hydrogen gas system where Kat and Angela company. Yeah. So if we integrate it, so we can mobilize as much as we can demand, it's daily or seasonal demand. So everything will be coupled and will be good for the developer and for the seller as well. But that will take time, so don't worry. I think it will take a few years from planning project development until we operate that, and we can do things in parallel for now. So that's my point.
Great, thank you. Thanks for adding that. And you know, just there was a point I think that Ross made towards the end about how you plan like everything all at once. And you know, in reality, it's not going to happen that way. We're not going to be able to have some magic master plan where everything nicely fits together and we all agree with it. So there is going to be stages to planning. And one of my main concerns is planning ahead of need, especially for the infrastructure that joins things together. Now, I would say that because I'm a gas distributor, but unless there are plans for how things ultimately need to connect up in a way that is ready for when it's needed, the challenges that we've got with wind capacity right now and distributing it to where it needs to go will be the same for hydrogen. So Ross is quite right. We do have challenges with what is the infrastructure that we might need to distribute hydrogen around the country. But, you know, first off, and to Becky's point about keeping it simple and working on the easy things first, making sure that the industrial decarbonisation, which is where hydrogen is going to begin in the early days, has the distributed networks needed to take 100% hydrogen where it's needed to go. And as that market develops, we'll start joining things up, including storage. Now, have we got a master plan on a piece of paper that's got all that written out? No. Is it work in progress? Yeah. And it's work in progress because we've got to start thinking about these things. Right, I'm going to go to the Q&A because we've got a few.
Sorry, Ange, can I just? Do you mind if I just pick up on that? Because
please do.
It is. You're absolutely right, but we haven't got this right over the last 30 years, and so I mentioned electricity, and you did there. We know that our grid has not been invested into No, we've lost Ross. Has everybody else lost him?
Yeah, it was getting really interesting as well.
It's not really true on those investments. So, the other thing is electric vehicles. So another great example is electric vehicles. You know, we do the rollout of electric vehicles, and we haven't got in place the planning and the charge points, and we're now furiously trying to catch up with charge points and again grid connections for electric vehicles. So, you know, we've got a history, I'm afraid, of, you know, on the one hand, the good thing is deploying and getting things going. The second thing is actually not concentrating on the macro stuff, the hard to do stuff, and having to find what is a hugely complicated, magnificent solution at the end of the day to solve the issue. Can we not try, as you say, Angela, to forward plan a bit more and take it in bite-sized chunks and invest in that stuff that we need and we know we're going to need at some point in the future? And that does include the storage, because Becky will know, because she's been involved in carbon capture and various other things, and I've been involved in gas storage. Getting these things permitted, consented through takes years and years and years, and huge buy-in from communities. It's not something you can turn around in the year and say we're now going to have a storage over there as for hydrogen. It's going to take years and years of efforts to get this infrastructure in place.
Absolutely. Right. Well, we've really got the conversation going now, because Becky and Barney have both put their hands up. So that's great. I apologise, audience. We'll come to your questions in a moment. Barney, what did you want to add?
I guess it's this point about kind of let's look at the electricity system and what has and hasn't worked there, and how do we apply that to sort of developing a hydrogen network and whatever. We absolutely have not invested in the electricity grid that we need to. And there are challenges around constraints on the system, getting wind from where it's needed to where it's demanded, where the demand is. And there are two aspects to that. One is we have a regulatory regime that does kind of the investment comes once it's needed. Which is too late, because then you can't get the infrastructure built quick enough, there's these delays. But the other thing is wind has been really successful, and it's been deployed much more quickly at a much larger scale than we had ever thought it would be. Back in 2010, I think we were saying we might get to 10 gigawatts or 20 gigawatts by 2030. We're now talking about 50 gigawatts. So, and I think my worry I find with the hydrogen is, at the moment we've got very small projects. And so we want to invest too much, how they're going to go. I would put a pretty big bet that actually hydrogen is going to be a really important part of our low carbon economy in the future. So we really need to start actually thinking about, what are the options, but really start thinking ahead and planning ahead. So once we do know what we think where we're going to go, we can get moving, rather than, okay, now we've got to install a distribution system. What's that going to look like? And you spend 5 years trying to work that out, rather than having kind of it, ready to go off the shelf, as it were.
Yeah, thank you. Becky?
There's 2 points I would like to make. And the first is, when you look at the Scandinavian countries, their kind of approach is very different to the approach we've had traditionally for our electrical distribution system. So we do it on a national type basis, probably because all of these companies were nationalised and whatever when they were all getting created. But they look at it much more on a district or a regional level. And I just wonder, and I suppose this is a question to everyone else in the panel, but also to everybody listening in, if you had a clean slate, would you design our energy system the way it is designed, or would you do it differently? Because the longer you have pipelines, the longer in the distance you've got from the generation to the use, you have losses and inefficient areas. So perhaps as we're looking at hydrogen as just a part of this solution, could we do it differently? Do we have to do it the same way? My other comment is that, fashions change, people change the way that they're living. Years ago, everybody, had gas in their houses for gas cookers, etc. Most people now have induction hobs, and gas is, if they've got it in their house, it's used for heating and not for very many other appliances. Now, but everybody has electricity in their house already. So we've looked, and I know there's a lot of studies out there, and there's been some successful studies of where, we've used hydrogen as a blend, or pure hydrogen, actually. I think I think it might have been Kate and Angela that they've done a trial for providing that to people in their homes. But perhaps that's not going to be the solution for the whole of the UK, and perhaps if we used our electrical systems that we've got already and reinforce the grid, there might be easier solutions, but hydrogen could still be part of that if it was a district type solution or scenario.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point. So I think there is going to be different solutions for different geographies. I think anybody who says it's going to be all of one thing or all of another thing is just in la la land, if I'm really honest with you. So we're going to need a mixture of different solutions to get to net zero, and some of those should be regional. So I'm going to move us on to answer some of the questions from the audience. We've got only a few minutes left, and there's quite a lot. So there's one that came up here that's actually really relevant about the challenges around planning and consenting for whether it be production facilities or like we're building the HyNet hydrogen pipeline up in the northwest. I say we're building it, doing the design and consenting work for it right now. There are lots of challenges. And the big challenge for me is around education of the general public. So it'd be good to get your thoughts on where the challenges are from your point of view, and what can we do about it? How do we go about providing the education that we need? And it's clear, by the way, from the questions, there's a lot of misunderstanding around hydrogen as well. So what do we need to do as a sector to have more visible, communications on this one? So who wants to? Ross, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first. I think it's a really it is a big issue, but it's something that we can solve. We do need to educate the regulators and the general public. We need to get the message out there, and that's beholden on the hydrogen industry to do that. And we need to make sure that we are doing that. I think there's some other things in terms of process that we need to be really scrupulous about as well. I mean, what tends to happen when you're deploying technologies is, especially in the early stages, is that when it comes to consenting, whatever the consenting body is, and let's not forget with hydrogen, you're going to involve things like the environment agencies, the health and safety executive. It's more complicated than maybe some of the traditional electricity generation that the renewable sector particularly has faced in the past. The key to those consenting bodies is what you don't want to find is that the first projects go through the ringer of having to show and demonstrate things, only to find that the next projects in a different area are having to go through the same thing again and again and again. And the same questions are coming up and the same studies are being required, when in actual fact, there's a solution that could be placed across the UK. And yes, it may be painful for the first projects, but once that's been done, the regulators can look at it and can learn from it. And that's not necessarily placing the onus on the regulators. It's the lawmakers saying to the regulators, you can rely on this. You don't need to be risk averse and have to force these studies to be done again and again and again. This is a standard, an industry standard that we've all looked at now and can be used. And as long as that can be satisfied, we can tick the boxes. And I think that process is going to be really important in the early stages.
I think you're right. That's a good solution. Becky, you have something to add, and then I'll move on to another question.
I wholeheartedly agree with Ross. I think you've only got to look at the EIAs that are done for wind farms, offshore wind farms, electrical distribution, overhead lines. We've got hundreds of examples of these now, and there's huge chapters, and at the end they say no likely significant impacts. But we have to do the whole big chapter every single time we do any of these projects. So I actually think that point should be applied to hydrogen, but to all of our renewables, to show that we've got the science, we know the science, we know what the impacts these types of developments have. And there will be some very critical things with hydrogen, whether it's safety, whether it's with regards to water quality, but whatever it is, there will be specific things to hydrogen that will need to be looked at, but there will be a whole raft of other things that I think could be quite almost like an agreement that we know these things are not going to be hugely impacted upon. So let's not delay things by 3 years so that you get 3 seasons of wintering bird surveys or something like that. Now that will be very location specific, and I totally get that, but there'll be a huge amount of things that you could scope out quite easily if people were on board and there was a kind of a sensible discussion about it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And there's something more about, I do think the existing situation with gas prices, with energy security, is making people feel more positive towards things happening in their backyard, because it's about energy security and resilience in this country, actually creating jobs and growth in this country as well, rather than importing things. So I think we have an opportunity as a sector now to really sell the future in a way that we might not have had. So I'm going to take chair's prerogative and answer a question myself, given it's about distribution networks and boilers and things. So Matthew Taylor's asked a question about whether existing systems can transport hydrogen, 100% hydrogen effectively, given it's a small molecule. So quite a lot of work has been done across the existing gas distribution networks and in homes to demonstrate that the existing infrastructure is compatible with 100% hydrogen, and if not, which bits aren't, so that we can work that out. that is work in progress. The good news, though, is that those yellow pipes that you see called up at the side of the road, which transport gas, is what you would use to transport hydrogen. It'd be the best material, it's polyethylene, and we've been replacing older mains with plastic for quite a long time. So the majority of the gas network, definitely by the time hydrogen is available in any volumes, will be ready to transport hydrogen under the right pressures that we need it. And obviously the question is, where does it go and how much, so that we can size things properly. So that's all work in progress. And then in the home, we've done quite a lot of work on hydrogen for use in buildings. And, Becky's right, it may not be the only solution for heating buildings. That's absolutely true. But there'll be some places where it makes good sense for good reason. And the boiler manufacturers have already made hydrogen ready boilers that can burn methane now. So if you replace your boiler, it can burn methane and can be easily switched to burn 100% hydrogen. The gas is different, so most appliances need to be slightly different in their components. So, and from a safety point of view, those aspects are being explored as well. So I think we're, if we do want to put hydrogen in homes, from a safety and a technical and feasibility point of view, ticking all those boxes. It's more about how much does hydrogen cost to make, which is the main thing that we need scale to get that cost down. Right, I'm going to come on to one last question. We have 3 minutes remaining, and if we can finish at 1 minute too, then we can say thank you to you all. So I'm just looking down the list of questions. I tell you what, rather than do that, I'll ask you all if there's one last statement that you want to make in relation to, what we really should be doing over the next year and what support we might need from government. If you can keep it nice and short, that'd be brilliant. So I'll go through in the order that you spoke, if you like. So Barney, do you want to go first?
Thank you, and thanks for having us. It's really making sure, I think, that the legislation that we have, goes through and we continue working on it. We are, as someone noted the questions, in the midst of a crisis, and that needs to be addressed. But there is a long-term, need to keep the stuff going as well. So keep our eye on the ball.
Yeah, thank you. Nguyen?
Hello. Two things for next 12 months. First of all, support for offshore wind hydrogen production project around UK. Secondly, put more support on demand side of hydrogen, especially maritime.
Thank you. Becky?
I think that thing about not just looking at it as hydrogen and recognizing the connections between all the different environments and the social networks and the communities and everything that we've got, and not getting too concentrated on just technology and looking at behaviors and where we can bring other benefits alongside hydrogen would be amazing.
Thank you, Becky. And finally, Ross.
Yeah, maybe slightly repeating it, but I think what we need is an unswerving commitment to net zero. We do not need any ambiguous statements coming up about net zero, because if you take it back to its basics, net zero then drives all sorts of things, including hydrogen, that makes hydrogen inevitable, as it were. And I think we got to remember, as someone said, that we're in a race to get the jobs, the supply chain, the hydrogen economy for the UK. And you can see that in all of the policies being thought about around energy in Europe and elsewhere. And it's a race that we really ought to win, and we're in a good place to win if we can demonstrate that unswerving commitment.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So just last for me to say a big thank you to all the panelists. I really appreciate your time today, and also those who listened in. Thank you for joining. I hope you found the conversation stimulating and useful, and I apologize we didn't get to all the questions, but we had a really good discussion. So thank you again for joining. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.